All right, let's get right into it. Think about this for a second. You've got two nations, Iran and Israel. They don't share a border, they don't have some ancient colonial beef, and yet, right now, they're locked in a direct, open war. It's wild, because for decades, this whole thing was fought in the shadows. But now, it's out in the open, a reality that honestly, most experts thought was years away, if it was ever going to happen.
I mean, what we've seen recently is just a shocking turn of events. For more than 40 years, this was a shadow war, right? A deadly game of proxy battles, cyber attacks, covert assassinations, you name it. But all those unwritten rules, they've been completely shredded. And that shadow war has exploded into a hot war, fought right out in the open, directly between Iran and Israel. So, it all begs the big question, the one we're going to unpack right now. How on earth did we get here? How did two countries that were once, believe it or not, quiet partners, become mortal enemies? It's a crazy story, and the answer actually stretches back over 100 years. And to really get it, we have to rewind the clock. Way back. We're talking about the collapse of a whole empire. See, the story doesn't even start with Iran and Israel. It starts with the end of the Ottoman Empire, an event that basically took a map of the Middle East, tore it up, and redrew it from scratch. And in doing so, it planted the seeds for everything that came next. So after World War I, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The winners, Britain and France, come in and they just carve up the whole region. And the British, in particular, were making promises all over the place. They promised Arab leaders their own independent states. At the same time, they were telling Jewish leaders, through what's known as the Balfour Declaration, that they'd support a Jewish national home in Palestine. You can see the problem, right? Two completely conflicting promises. This just set the stage for decades of chaos, and it all finally boiled over in 1948, when the State of Israel was declared and was immediately invaded by 5 of its Arab neighbors. But here's the kicker. You know who wasn't in that fight? Iran. You might be wondering, where's Iran in all this? The answer is pretty much on the sidelines. Remember, Iran isn't an Arab nation, it's Persian. It had no real dog in that fight. And get this, the government at the time, led by the Shah, actually had quiet diplomatic and even some military cooperation with Israel. The initial conflict was purely Arab-Israeli. Iran was not the enemy. So what changed? What flipped the script completely? It was one single seismic event that just rocked the entire Middle East, the 1979 Iranian Revolution. This is the moment everything, and I mean everything, changes. Now, this revolution didn't just happen overnight. The roots go way back. You have to look at 1953, when the CIA and British intelligence actually staged a coup. They kicked out Iran's democratically elected leader because he wanted to nationalize the country's oil. And who did they put back in power? The pro-Western Shah. For Iranians, this was a deep national humiliation that they never, ever forgot. That resentment against foreign meddling just simmered under the surface for 26 years until it finally exploded in 1979. The Shah was swept from power, and Ayatollah Khomeini returned to lead the new Iran. And the change wasn't gradual, it was dramatic. It happened almost overnight. Iran's entire identity just flipped 180 degrees. It went from being a pro-Western monarchy to a fiercely anti-Western theocracy. Its main ally, the United States, became the Great Satan. And Israel, well, by extension, it went from being a quiet behind-the-scenes partner to a bitter ideological enemy, an illegitimate Zionist entity that had no right to exist in the heart of the Muslim world. And this is the key point to understand. Iran became a theocracy. That means the government wasn't being run based on normal stuff like borders or trade anymore. It was being run based on a radical, revolutionary religious ideology. So this new conflict with Israel, it wasn't about land. It wasn't about resources. It was existential. It was an ideological battle dictated from the top by the new clerical rulers in Tehran. Okay, so we have this new ideological war, but it couldn't be fought directly. Iran was pretty isolated, especially during its brutal 8-year war with Iraq in the 80s. So it had to get creative. It developed a whole new strategy, one that would define its conflict with Israel for the next 4 decades, a war fought from the shadows. And the absolute key to this shadow strategy was the proxy war. Iran figured out pretty brilliantly from a strategic perspective that it could fight its enemies, Israel and the US, without ever having to face them in a direct, conventional war it knew it couldn't win. The plan? Fund, arm, and train other groups to do the fighting for them. This whole strategy led to what military analysts now call the ring of proxies. Iran started building this whole network of militant groups all around Israel. You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, which became its crown jewel. You've got Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis down in Yemen, and various militias spread across Syria and Iraq. The whole goal was to surround Israel, to apply constant pressure from every single direction, all while developing a nuclear program in the background that Israel saw as a threat to its very existence. Of course, Israel wasn't just sitting there taking it. It fought back in the shadows with its own set of tools: intelligence, sabotage, and covert ops. It's widely believed that Israel was behind the assassinations of several top Iranian nuclear scientists. They're credited with sabotaging nuclear facilities and, famously, unleashing the Stuxnet computer virus, a piece of malware so advanced it physically destroyed Iranian centrifuges. This was the deadly, secret back and forth that defined that whole era. For decades, this shadow war worked. In a weird way, it operated under a set of unwritten rules. Both sides kind of knew just how far they could push without starting an all-out war. But then, starting in late 2023, those rules didn't just get bent, they got systematically shattered, one after another. Everything kicked off on October 7th, 2023. Hamas, the Iran-backed group in Gaza, launched a horrific attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people. To put that in perspective, it was the single deadliest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. And it gave Israel's government a mandate to go after its enemies harder and more aggressively than ever before. And Israel's response in Gaza was absolutely ferocious. By the end of 2024, Gaza health officials were reporting that over 40,000 Palestinians had been killed, a majority of them women and children. The United Nations called the humanitarian situation a catastrophe. This, in turn, enraged people across the region and basically activated Iran's entire network of proxies. And from there, look how quickly things spiraled out of control. In April 2024, Israel bombs an Iranian consulate building in Syria. That's a huge red line. It's basically sovereign territory. Iran retaliates with its first ever direct missile and drone attack on Israel. A few months later, Israel assassinates the powerful leader of Hezbollah. And then in October, Iran launches an even bigger missile attack, saying it was payback for the assassinations. The tit for tat was no longer secret. The shadow war was officially over. And just like that, the region is in a terrifying new reality. The old rules are gone. The shadows are gone. And now the entire world is holding its breath, asking a bunch of really urgent questions about what happens next. The absolute worst-case scenario, the one that keeps military planners and diplomats up at night, is something like this: a massive, coordinated attack. A full-scale war aimed at totally dismantling Iran's military and nuclear program. We're talking strikes across all of Iran's provinces, maybe even a direct hit on its leadership. A move like that would absolutely guarantee a devastating region-wide war.
And that brings us to Iran's biggest trump card, its most powerful threat in any major war. Tehran has warned for years that if it's pushed too far, it will shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Think about this. A fifth of the entire world's oil supply passes through that tiny channel. Closing it would be a chokehold on the global economy. It would send energy prices and inflation into an absolute catastrophic spiral. Which leaves all of us facing some of the most urgent questions of our time. Can this thing be contained, or is it just going to keep expanding, pulling in other countries, maybe even global powers? Can our already fragile global economy handle the shock of a major war in the Middle East? And honestly, can any government in that region really survive the fallout from all this? Look, here's what we know for sure. The chaos we're seeing today isn't random. It's the end result of a century of history, of collapsed empires, of broken promises, of a fiery revolution, and of a long, cold shadow war that has finally and tragically boiled over. We know exactly how this story began. The terrifying